Ave. $300 million. That is the reported budget of Mindseye, a game so broken, so incoherent, so unmistakably dead on arrival, that it has players asking a question nobody in the industry wants to answer. What if these failures are not accidents? They can't be, right? Devs aren't blind. They see the mess that they're delivering. So what if those expensive, extravagant disasters were designed to fail? And I don't mean in the sense of an artistic risk or a misguided passion project, but a financial vessel. Because in a world where metrics rule and accountability is buried in corporate layers, AAA gaming might have a money laundering problem. Wherever there's a lot of money, there's a lot of laundering and a lot of corruption. And with the gaming industry becoming this big, it isn't immune to it anymore. Let us walk through how it might work. First comes the funding. It begins with shadowy investors, shell companies, and high-risk capital firms funneling money into a studio. On paper, this money is for development. It goes towards animation, level design, motion capture, voice acting, what have you. But who's doing the work? Often the contracts go to other shell companies, many of them owned by the same network of individuals. Money moves, invoices get filed, taxes get paid, but no real work gets done. Then comes the hype. A trailer drops, maybe there's a famous creative director, maybe a few former Rockstar or CD Projekt devs attached. Previews hit the blog, a few influencers are paid to say it looks promising. The goal is not to build a player base, the goal is to legitimize operations. Because once you can say, look, we have a game in active development, it becomes easy to justify the next wave of funding. Milestone payments are released, more shell contracts go out, the paper trail grows. And finally, the launch. The game ships in a state so broken, it defies explanation. The mechanics barely function, the UI is a mess, the writing feels AI generated. There are systems that clearly never interacted with each other. Nobody playtested this. But it doesn't matter, because the objective was never to sell copies. It was to complete the laundering cycle. Money enters the system disguised as investments. It gets shuffled around in fake development costs, and now it exits clean. This is not just speculation. It is a model, one we already know from other industries like sports betting, construction, film, crypto. It follows the same steps: placement, layering, integration. In gaming, placement happens when money is injected into a studio or a group of developers. Layering is achieved through outsourced work and license deals. Integration is the final release, no matter the outcome. And that brings us back to Mindseye. With its reported $300 million budget and a launch that drew under 5,000 players, nothing about this game adds up. Previews promised a next-gen experience, the reality was a barely functional game. Post-launch, the co-CEO actually lashed out at reviewers, calling them paid actors. Can you imagine the nerve and the projection? Studio executives exited before release. Roadmap are a joke. The so-called attempts to fix the game are a joke. No community engagement. It'll be just silence. So who gained from this? Not the players, not the critics, not the devs caught in the middle, because they're gonna be sent off looking for another job, as we've seen so many times so far, and those executives couldn't care less. But maybe, just maybe, the investors actually profit here. Maybe the companies contracted to build these non-existing features. Maybe the executives who signed off on everything and quietly moved on. In an industry where engagement metrics can be faked, where Steam players can be bots, where trailers are more important than the code, this model is not just possible, it is dangerously plausible. We already see asset flips making money from stolen credit cards. We already see free-to-play titles that exist to sell worthless cosmetics to whales and bots. We already see companies more concerned with showing player growth to shareholders than building a loyal community. The question is no longer whether it could happen. The question is how often it already does. Because when you step back, a pattern starts to emerge. Massive budgets, confusing production cycles, games that launch and disappear in weeks. We've seen many of those lately, haven't we? Studios that shutter immediately after release, and executives that reappear months later with new companies, new funding, and a fresh pitch. Sound familiar? We treat these games like creative failures, but maybe that is the wrong frame. Maybe they are logistical successes for people who were never in the business of making games in the first place. Maybe they are laundering platforms with just enough code to pass as legitimate. And now, with a looming recession and projected financial crashes within the next 2 years, it is no surprise that they're amping up the money laundering. And if this is true, it changes how we understand the entire industry. It means that some of the most expensive games ever made were never meant to be played. They were meant to be watched. Real games can fail. Great ideas sometimes fall apart, of course. But when a $300 million title launches like mindseye did, or Concord with their $500-600 million, or Skull and Bones with $800 million, completely broken, beyond repair, silent, hollow, those demand scrutiny. Because that kind of failure, that actually requires effort. It requires planning and intent. And that is the part that nobody's going to want to talk about in the industry, but we sure as hell will.